Tuesday, April 29, Daniel 7. The dream of Daniel 2 was first presented to a Babylonian king. The vision of Daniel 7, in contrast, was presented to a Hebrew prophet, a member of God's covenant people. Daniel is shown the same subject as was Nebuchadnezzar, but from a different perspective. Instead of a statue, he sees a series of nations rising up out of the sea, the result of wind churning up the water. These nations were in a continual state of strife, causing a perpetual shift in power among them. Such passages as Psalm 65 verses 5 to 8, Isaiah 17 verses 12 and 13, and Jeremiah 46 verses 7 and 8 use the analogy of floods and waves to depict the tumult among the nations. I'll now read those passages. Psalm 65 verses 5 to 8. By awesome deeds in righteousness you will answer us, O God of our salvation, you who are the confidence of all the ends of the earth and of the far-off seas, who established the mountains by his strength, being clothed with power, you who still the noise of the seas, the noise of their waves, and the tumult of the peoples. They also who dwell in the farthest parts are afraid of your signs. You make the outgoings of the morning and evening rejoice. And Isaiah 17 verses 12 and 13. Woe to the multitude of many people, who make a noise like the roar of the seas, and to the rushing of nations, that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations will rush like the rushing of many waters, but God will rebuke them, and they will flee far away, and be chased like the chaff of the mountains before the wind. And Jeremiah 46 verses 7 and 8. Who is this coming up like a flood, whose waters move like the rivers? Egypt rises up like a flood, and its waters move like the rivers. And he says, I will go up and cover the earth. I will destroy the city and its inhabitants. In contrast, the Promised Land existed, at least for a period of time, as an island of peace and safety amid a sea of Gentile kingdoms, a sacred nation, established on the solid foundation of God's government, as opposed to the unruly nations around it. Read Daniel 7, verses 1 to 3. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. There is a lot of movement in this scene. What lessons can we draw from this imagery, such as the beast first arising from the sea? Daniel watches the chaos of Gentile warfare from the shore, when suddenly the beasts start coming up on the land, into his territory. Gentile problems had now become his people's problems. They had chosen to live like Gentiles, so now they would live with and under Gentiles. Starting with Babylonian domination, God's covenant people never again enjoyed complete or long-lasting autonomy. This loss of autonomy for God's people today will persist until the close of time, when Christ is finally restored to his rightful place as our King. In the New Testament, God's people continue to suffer under the thumb of the Roman Empire, and then under the persecutions of the little horn, pagan Rome's successor. Though historically some nations have been better than others, and some eras have been more peaceful than others, the vast majority of the history of nations, peoples and empires has simply been going from one tragedy to another, from one oppressor to another. And often this is all done under rulers claiming only the best of intentions for their own people. What a contrast to the rule that God had wanted for his people, if only they would have chosen it. How does Romans 3 verses 10 to 19 help explain so much of our world? Romans 3 verses 10 to 19. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none who understands. There is none who seeks after God. They have all turned aside. They have together become unprofitable. There is none who does good, no, not one. Their throat is an open tomb. With their tongues they have practised deceit. The poison of asps is under their lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may become guilty before God. How does verse 19 especially show why we so desperately need the gospel in our lives?
Tuesday, April 29. Daniel 7. Every nation that has come upon the stage of action has been permitted to occupy its place on the earth, that it might be seen whether it would fulfill the purpose of the Watcher and the Holy One. Prophecy has traced the rise and fall of the world's great empires, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. With each of these, as with nations of less power, history repeated itself. Each had its period of test, each failed, its glory faded, its power departed, and its place was occupied by another. While the nations rejected God's principles and in this rejection wrought their own ruin, it was still manifest that the divine overruling purpose was working through all their movements. Education, pages 176 and 177. The crown removed from Israel passed successively to the kingdoms of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. God says it shall be no more until he come whose right it is, and I will give it him. That time is at hand. Today the signs of the times declare that we are standing on the threshold of great and solemn events. Everything in our world is in agitation. Before our eyes is fulfilling the Savior's prophecy of the events to precede his coming. Ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. The present is a time of overwhelming interest to all living. Rulers and statesmen, men who occupy positions of trust and authority, thinking men and women of all classes have their attention fixed upon the events taking place about us. They are watching the strained, restless relations that exist among the nations. They observe the intensity that is taking possession of every earthly element, and they realize that something great and decisive is about to take place, that the world is on the verge of a stupendous crisis. Angels are now restraining the winds of strife until the world shall be warned of its coming doom. But a storm is gathering, ready to burst upon the earth, and when God shall bid his angels loose the winds, there will be such a scene of strife as no pen can picture. To us who are standing on the very verge of the fulfillment of these great scenes, of what deep moment, of what living interest are these delineations of the things to come, events for which, since our first parents turned their steps from Eden, God's children have watched and waited, longed and prayed. The Time of the End, Advent Review and Sabbath Herald, November 23, 1905, paragraphs 5 to 8 and 13.
And remember, God is always faithful.